Let's now move forward with textual analysis. And now I'll talk about the importance of language, grammar, and rhetoric in an analysis of discourse. Annabella is very clear about it, and she thinks that analyzing these features are very important to find the real meanings behind a text or within a text. The analysis of language might include the choice of vocabulary made by the author in a text. It may involve some concepts, vocabulary items, lexical choices, and maybe the grammatical features and styles also. So overall, these elements may be coupled with the grammar, uh, language, choice of words, and rhetoric. Because the vocabulary used for a certain text represents a certain reality in a certain way. Therefore, identifying what kind of adjectives, nouns, or pronouns have been used in a text, or the style was formal or informal, or maybe the style may be judged from any other perspective also. These elements can be helpful in critical discourse analysis of a news item. Then grammar can also be helpful in understanding the underlying ideological standpoints in a text, because how a certain message or idea has been constructed through grammar is very important. For example, an important message may be constructed in a passive voice, and the passive voice construction of that certain message may be based on the writer's intention to hide the agent, and the writer would not intend to give credit to a certain agent or actor. For example, if there is a news about some action of the government which has positive impact or would have bring in positive vibes about the government among masses, but the author or the newspaper is not in favor of that government, so they might say straight away that this action has been done instead of saying that government has performed this action. So they can take away that credit from the government while creating creating the representation of that specific news event in their newspaper. This is how grammar can be very beneficial, can be very useful and critical in understanding the real meanings of a text, and also at the same time the real intentions of the text maker or the writer. In addition, metaphors, rhetorical figures, persuasive devices can also be very helpful. Rhetorical devices usually carry the emotionally charged discourse, and they usually appeal uh, to readers' emotions more than their thoughts. So, such devices are also employed in political and media discourses, and therefore they need to be investigated again to understand the real intention of the writer or the speaker. Then we can also look into the formulations advanced by social actors uh, in order to understand the various constructions of journalistic discourse. So, all these factors related to language can be very helpful in understanding various elements of meaning in a discourse. In addition to these linguistic elements, we can get into discursive strategies also. What kind of discursive strategy has been employed by the writer to convey a certain meaning? So it's not about choice of words only, but how those words have been used to create a certain impact. In which way the writer has conveyed his message, what strategy he has employed. In this regard, we can see that discursive manipulation, intervention of reality by social actors, including journalists, is very important to be investigated in critical discourse analysis. And in order to investigate such manipulations by the writers or journalists, we need to analyze the discursive strategies employed by them. And such interventions made by journalists or the writers sometimes may be conscious or unconscious. And more likely they are conscious, because people create such manipulative texts in order to reach or find certain political goals. Important discursive strategies in this regard, as Annabella sees it, can be framing. Framing includes uh, giving or selecting a certain angle or perspective for a text. When a writer deliberately tries to present a certain news item or certain issue from a certain angle, this is called framing. And in this framing, we can see that the writers usually organize discourse according to certain point of view or perspective, um, most likely which would favor him or her. In the production of text, framing involves selection and composition. The selection includes inclusion and exclusion of certain elements which may be relevant to that news item, but the writer or author deliberately avoids them so that his own point of view or perspective, or somebody to whom he or she wants to favor, uh, that perspective might be included or framed more, highlighted more prominently in the text. Then it also includes composition, which is the arrangement of the text. Sometimes arrangement of the text can be made in a way where the perspectivization of text can be made in a judgmental way or a biased manner, or can be, in other words, in more polite words, can be framed. Positioning is another discursive strategy which is employed in the text of newspapers. This involves positioning actors in a certain way. So the whatever the actors, objects, and subjects or objects involved in a text, how they are framed, how they are positioned against each other in a text, that's also very important. Who is doing what, or who is doing the major portion of the action, who is responsible for a certain action. All these are questions would be answered by knowing the positioning of actors in a text. Positioning is also related to the projection of identity of the participants in a text. So that for that matter, it is also very important. Then legitimization is another discursive strategy which may consist of justifying a certain viewpoint based on certain normative or cultural arguments. And these arguments may have been, in many cases, twisted for a certain purpose, or maybe represented with a certain hint of biasness that needs to be investigated. So what has been tried to be legitimized, which generally is not, or in what ways that legitimization comes in front of us in the text. Then politicization is another strategy in which a certain issue can be politicized, which generally is not, but different arguments about this presented in a certain way that it shows some kind of a huge debate in the society and may show some possible negative future, negative or positive future outcomes, but this needs to be debated in the society. So for example, issues about climate change can be presented in a way that they need an urgent redressal from the government or urgent attention of the people, and it's certain aspects may be highlighted which need to be discussed in public and by the policymakers. Ideological standpoints, another important aspect of critical discourse analysis, according to Annabella Carvalho's framework. She thinks that these ideological standpoints are very important elements to be known because these are the core aspects, these are the core meanings which most of the times writers want to convey. And they could be presented clearly, obviously, in a text, or sometimes, rather, most of the time, they may be presented in a hidden manner. And these ideologies may be related to social political values associated with stances towards a certain reality, which may convey support a certain group or individual when the news items or articles in the newspaper are written. It calls for a mutually constitutive view of ideology and mediated discourses, how ideologies are presented in implicit or explicit manner in a newspaper that needs to be known. A broader view of discursive realization of ideology is necessary. And it also is important to be known that ideology is an overarching aspect and is embedded in the selection and representation of objects and actors, language, discursive strategies. There cannot be a single way to know them. There cannot be a single way. It should be or it can be known from all aspects. You can reach ideology through language choices of the author, their construction of sentences, grammar, their their various use of historical events, their discursive strategies, what has been framed and what has been hidden. All these factors can help you to reach the and to find the ideological standpoints of an author. And these elements are very important to be known because that would lead you to know the fundamental motivations and justifications for which a certain piece of discourse has been written or spoken. That's why Annabella puts a lot of emphasis on it.